Hi, I'm glad you stopped by again. If this is your first time here, welcome. Do stay a bit and enjoy the virtual conversation. We're talking about how I tried to renovate our Class C RV. I think I mentioned before that the Wheelie House I bought from a couple in Virginia. They told us an amazing story about fixing leaks in the RV. Apparently, their RV tech hooked up a mighty fan to the door of the camper. Then, with a small bottle of soapy water, he crawled around the roof, plugging all the leaks. The Wheelie House has many large openings, several of which I've cleared up, by the way. So the fan must have been a mighty fan indeed. Lots of rain on our first camping trip down to Lake Michigan. Water was on the ground most of the time, standing about, inch, maybe two. The mighty fan story might have been true, but the plan did not work. The overcab filled and leaked and became a giant mess. A spongy, smelly mess. Anyway, getting that thing fixed was perhaps the most epic failure I've ever attempted. Do be careful when hiring an RV company. Anyway, since I had to fix things up anyway, I started full-on renovations, starting, I guess, winter 2019. About a year and a half later, maybe 2 years later, we had the thing pretty much done somewhere in 2020. Renovations mostly started at the back and worked toward the cab. Not really a plan, although I like to think it might have been a plan. I started out by cleaning. There apparently had been a bunch of mice hanging around, and they were underneath the lavatory cabinet. So it looked like a vacuum, shop vac, and I could get in there and clean all that stuff up. So the plan seemed to work just fine. I pushed the hose in there and sucked things up and pushed a little further, and there was some more a little bit further back, and I pushed a little bit harder, pushed my shoulder kind of in so I could get at things, and pop! What used to be a nice lavatory cabinet was now an unattractive pile of splintered wood. That's when I decided, let's make new cabinets for the RV. It turns out that there was a lot of other sort of old wobbly and damaged cabinets and countertops that I ended up needing to fix up. One thing we tried making the new lavatory cabinet was putting in one of those little tip-open drawers. I don't know, we thought it might work. I don't know if it really does or not, but it was easy to make anyway. I painted everything, the new cabinet as well as most everything else, and then I covered it over with polyacrylic. That seems to work really well. That seals things up nicely. It's a pretty hard surface at the end. The painting, though, takes a bit of work. About 7 coats to kind of get that nice sandstone look that I was trying to go for. Underneath the lavatory cabinet, there's all manner of wiring and plumbing and whatnot. I decided to put in cutoff valves for the faucet. First time I ever used PEX. It was surprising. It was easy. It was quick. It was leak-proof. It shocked me. The electrical work wasn't too bad. I put in a new 120 outlet did a few other things to make the electrical at least seem a little bit safer. So then I had a completely operational lavatory and lavatory cabinet, which, by the way, was much lighter than the original equipment. I guess that was a good thing. Of course, it probably cost a little more too. We decided to redesign the booth where you eat. There's an old seat belt system in there, and we didn't feel like, my wife and I didn't feel like we were going to be, having lots of people travel with us, so we didn't really feel like we needed to keep those seat belts. So I took all that stuff off. All that heavy steel, that's probably at least 100 pounds. There's a lot of trouble getting it out. All of this stuff is put in the slide out here on the left side of the camper. And apparently all this heavy metal had been installed before the slide out was put in place. So it was a pain in the neck to get the old bolts out of the way without, causing some serious trouble. In the middle of the floor, there's this giant hole in the ground. Open it up, look at the ground. I guess you could check and see what the what the road conditions were like. I don't know. There was a big hook that you hooked up in there, and then the other end of the hook you hooked to the seatbelt system. I guess it was a safety issue that they'd put in. So I took all that out, kind of fixed things up, and put a little bit of spray foam in the hole. I figured that would be a good bit of insulation. Next morning, I found out how much foam insulation you're supposed to use. Live and learn. There's also a captain's chair. I don't know what kind of a captain it would have been, but not a very happy captain because the thing was pretty uncomfortable. But we unbolted it, and I fixed up the holes that were left in the floor. And it's really nice because it gives us a lot more room when the slide out is in. Of course, there's no place to sit down, put on your shoes and stuff like that. The couple that sold us the camper left us a little stool though, and that works pretty well. Well, on to the bathroom. There are two things in the bathroom. There's the tub. It's the littlest tiny little dollhouse tub you ever saw, and a toilet. Well, the toilet leaked. Over the years, the seals and the gaskets dry out, and well, they got to be replaced. So I took the thing out, cleaned it up, had the pleasure of sticking my arm all the way into the toilet to fix it. Not the most fun. But at least it doesn't leak now. Behind the toilet, there's a little chase where there's wires, 12-volt wires, 110-volt wires, plumbing, etc. I took all that out. Of course, the mice had been in there, so I cleaned it all up and kind of put everything back together with a cutoff valve for the toilet. So if the toilet, or when the toilet breaks, we'll be able to turn that little cutoff valve and we can still use water in the rest of the camper. Beside the toilet is the tub. So I had to work on that. So I was trying to take off the plywood front of the tub. And by taking it off, I destroyed it completely. But once again, it was all filled with mouse droppings in there. So I cleaned all that up, fixed up a couple of the plumbing pieces with extra cutoff valves, did a few other things. Right where the tub has the drain, goes into the gray tank, there's a great giant hole. I mean, it's big enough so that small to medium-sized animals can sneak in there. You know, think mice, rats, snakes. So I figured I probably ought to clean that up. I found a product called rodent wool. Now, rodent wool works great, but it is the most evil stuff. Oh my goodness. It's like steel wool. Instead of just regular steel wool, the steel wool part is like tiny little razor wire. Oh, awful stuff. Anyway, when you get some of this rodent wool, they send you a special pair of gloves, and I found out that I should have used them. Leather gloves didn't even work at all. That rodent wool cut right through the leather and gave me a number of unhappy cuts. Anyway, I got some spray glue, you know, from the art store, sprayed it all around in there, and then stuffed that rodent wool down in there. So far, so good. No critters in the camper. I decided that the bathroom should get painted. Why not freshen it up a little bit? So I used that Gianni countertop paint. I figured that would be good enough for a shower. You know, you could wipe it off just like a countertop, so forth and so on. Man, that was a job. You use the sponge to daub on the different pieces, and you can't slide it, because if you slide it, then well, it doesn't look right. That was a lot of work, and I ended up with a week or so of very sore arms. I wouldn't recommend it, but it does look pretty good. Well, I put everything back together, got a new piece of plywood for the plywood I destroyed, put some molding around the tub. What I did was I got some molding at the big box store, plastic molding, and put that in. It seems to work just fine. And I rebuilt that chase behind the tub to hold everything together, and got it all done. I was really, really happy about that. That's a tiny little space to work in. It's just not as much fun as you want it to be. And there's lots of other places to work on the RV.